Loretta Jones's case transports us to the town of Price, Utah, in the United States. Price, with a population of less than 9,000 people as per the 2010 census, is the largest city in Carbon County. It provides a suburban ambience for its residents, who predominantly reside in their own homes. Renowned for its captivating rock formations, expansive deserts, and breathtaking canyons, Price offers a picturesque setting for recreational pursuits. According to statistics, the likelihood of falling victim to a crime in Price is approximately 1 in 156. It is within this tranquil town that our story unfolds. Loretta Jones resided in Price alongside her 4-year-old daughter, Heidi Jones. Despite being young and unmarried, Loretta strived to make ends meet for herself and her daughter. She wholeheartedly dedicated herself to Heidi, who fondly reminisces about the cherished moments they shared together. Loretta was responsible for creating the majority of the clothing that Heidi wore during her childhood, as well as the clothes for her dolls. Together, they led a joyful and content life. However, their happiness was abruptly cut short. On that warm summer night of July 30th, 1970, Heidi bid her mother goodnight, unaware that it might be the last time she would see her alive. The following morning, July 31st, 1970, Heidi woke up to a devastating sight in the living room of their home. Her mother, Loretta, lay lifeless on the floor. Being too young to fully comprehend the situation, Heidi left the house and encountered her neighbor, Sue Ann Hovart, who was engaged in worm-digging activities near her apartment. Upon seeing Heidi, Hovart gestured for her to come closer and witness her task. However, Heidi responded with a heartbreaking statement. "I can't. I think my mommy is dead." These words prompted Hovart to immediately abandon her activity and accompany Heidi back to Loretta's home to assess the situation. Inside, Hovart discovered Loretta lying face down, partially unclothed, with blood covering her back and hair. Hovart promptly contacted the police, and the police chief, Art Poloni, promptly arrived at the scene. The police, arriving at approximately 11:40 a.m. on July 31st, 1990, confirmed Loretta's demise. The living room was saturated with blood, and Loretta had sustained 17 stab wounds. Interestingly, there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator was likely known to Loretta. Furthermore, Loretta did not exhibit any defensive wounds, suggesting that she had not attempted to protect herself during the attack. The medical examiner determined that Loretta had been killed with a small, narrow knife and had traces of bodily fluid on her. Unfortunately, DNA testing was still in its infant stages at that time. As there were no CCTV cameras to capture the events, the investigators turned to the young girl present in the house during the incident, hoping to gather some information. Heidi informed the investigators that after her mother had put her to bed, Loretta had returned to caution her against leaving her room. Heidi, in her statement to the investigators, mentioned that she had never heard her mother scream or struggle on the night of the murder. However, she did bring up something that raised concerns among the investigators. Heidi explicitly stated, "Tom did it. Tom killed my mom." Heidi's grandmother diligently recorded every word Heidi uttered during that time, and there was an entry in her notepad on the morning the body was discovered. Heidi confided in her grandmother, accusing Tom of being responsible for her mother's death. Eventually, they stumbled upon Loretta's diary, which contained a name similar to the one Heidi had mentioned, Thomas Egley. According to the diary, Thomas and Loretta had been in a relationship for 2 months prior to her demise, and that was the extent of the information they could gather about him. The investigators found themselves with very little to work with in this case, apart from the name mentioned by a 4-year-old Heidi, who was asleep at the time of the murder. However, the police soon received another lead to pursue. At around 9:30 p.m., Kulo Fennell, a 10-year-old girl residing 3 blocks away from Loretta's house, was outside riding her bike with her brother. As darkness began to fall, Kulo's brother went inside the house, leaving his bike behind, while Kulo remained outside alone. As she approached the front door, a man suddenly attacked her from behind, covering her mouth with his hand. Fortunately, Kulo managed to free herself from the kidnapper's grasp, and let out a piercing scream. Startled, the man fled the scene. Kulo caught a glimpse of her assailant and the direction he fled towards. She informed the police that he ran in the direction of Loretta's house. Later, at the police station, Thomas Egley's photograph was included in a lineup, as he was already a suspect in a murder case that occurred on the same night. Kulo identified Thomas as the person who attempted to abduct her, leading to his apprehension for questioning. The investigators believed that Kulo's case and Loretta's murder were connected. On August 1, 1970, they interrogated Thomas regarding both incidents separately, to which he vehemently denied any involvement. Thomas claimed that on the night of the homicide, he caught a ride with a group of teenagers who later dropped him off at a fast food establishment where he had hamburgers. Subsequently, he stated that he proceeded to a bar named Highway Rendezvous on Springland Road at approximately 11:30 p.m., and after that, he returned to his residence. According to Thomas, he did not encounter Loretta on that particular day. In order to verify Thomas's account, the investigators visited the bar and inquired if they had indeed seen him that night. The bar owner confirmed that she had seen him, noting that he appeared somewhat anxious, nervous, and had red speckles on his shirt. The investigators questioned Thomas regarding the red speckles mentioned on his shirt, to which he explained that it was likely paint residue, as he had been engaged in painting activities throughout the day. Despite his explanation, the investigators proceeded to collect the clothing Thomas claimed to have worn that night, as well as his hair, blood, and fingerprint samples. The fibers that they discovered on Tom's clothing did match the fibers that were found to be similar to those on Loretta Jones's rug. Investigators believed they had sufficient probable cause to apprehend Thomas, and they did so. Thomas was taken into custody while residing in a motel in Helper, Utah, alongside his girlfriend, who was 8 months pregnant. However, during the preliminary hearing on November 5, 1970, the defense presented witnesses who provided an alibi for Thomas. The prosecutor argued that the fiber evidence resembled the rug in Loretta's home, but this alone was insufficient, considering Thomas had previously visited Loretta's residence. Nevertheless, due to Kulo Fennell's identification of Thomas as the individual who attempted to abduct her, he faced charges of attempted kidnapping and spent 90 days in jail. Following his release, Thomas reintegrated into society and relocated to Rockford, Colorado in 1971. Despite this, Loretta's case remained unresolved. Over the years, Heidi grappled with the trauma of her mother's death, confiding in her grandmother, who had taken her in immediately after the incident. Heidi consistently expressed her belief that Tom was responsible for her mother's murder, and her grandmother diligently documented every detail in a journal. Heidi also disclosed that Tom had frequently subjected Loretta to physical abuse. Eventually, the adults in the household attempted to suppress Heidi's recollections and discourage her from discussing the matter further. Although Heidi ceased discussing it openly, she never forgot what transpired in 1970. As Heidi matured, she realized the extent of the attack her mother endured and felt compelled to seek justice by bringing Tom to the sheriff's office for questioning. Decades passed, and Heidi moved forward with her life, but her mother's case remained etched in her memory. While Heidi cherished her mother's memory, she did not actively advocate for the reopening of the case. However, one fateful day, Heidi found herself captivated by a television show called Unsolved Mysteries. This show sparked a fire within her, igniting a determination to seek justice for her mother. Undeterred by previous disappointments, she embarked on a massive letter-writing campaign, reaching out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Price City Police Department, and Carbon County Sheriff. Unfortunately, her efforts were met with silence, but this did not deter her spirit. Heidi persisted, pouring her heart and soul into each letter she wrote. Then, in 2009, a glimmer of hope emerged when Heidi made a post on her social media platform. To her surprise, one of her former high school friends, David Brewer, responded. As they reconnected after years of separation, Heidi discovered that David was now working with the Carbon County Sheriff. This revelation presented a golden opportunity for Heidi to reopen her mother's cold case. Determined to seize this chance, Heidi intentionally crossed paths with David at a local arts festival. Their encounter allowed her to engage in a heartfelt conversation about her mother's tragic fate. Moved by Heidi's emotional account, David was astounded that he had never heard of her story during their high school years. Heidi recounted the haunting memory of her mother's final moments, describing how her mother kissed her goodnight before warning her to stay hidden in her room. It was as if her mother had foreseen the impending danger. Heidi also shared her belief that Tom, a figure from her hazy recollections, was responsible for her mother's demise. She vaguely remembered witnessing a distressing scene involving Tom and her mother, possibly involving coercion or violence. But she never heard her mother scream. Deeply affected by Heidi's narrative, David made a heartfelt decision to assist her in seeking justice for her mother. As a result, Loretta's case was finally reopened. However, David faced numerous challenges in his pursuit of the truth. The crime files had mysteriously vanished, leaving him with only past media coverage and Heidi's fragmented memories. Undeterred, David embarked on a mission to locate Thomas, who was now residing in Rockford, Colorado, for further questioning. When Thomas was questioned about the events of July 30th, 1970, he was able to recall what he ate and did throughout the day. However, he claimed to have no recollection of Loretta or her name. This raised suspicions for David, who began to believe that Thomas might be the killer. Unfortunately, without any concrete evidence, David had no choice but to leave without arresting Thomas. In his pursuit of the truth, David also sought out Marcia Hidalgo, a former girlfriend to Thomas. Marcia informed David that Thomas arrived home late on the night of the murder and immediately took a bath with his clothes on. The following day, Thomas went to the laundromat and returned home missing several clothing items. Marcia questioned Thomas about his whereabouts, and he claimed to have delivered hamburgers to a woman and her daughter. Although David couldn't fully make sense of this information, it further strengthened his belief that Thomas was responsible for Loretta's murder. Exhausting all other options, David contemplated exhumation as a last resort. However, he was unsure of how Heidi, Loretta's daughter, would react to such a request. Surprisingly, when David shared his thoughts with Heidi, she expressed her willingness to even dig the grave herself if it meant obtaining justice for her mother. With Heidi's support, they proceeded with the exhumation, which proved to be emotionally challenging for her. Unfortunately, due to water damage, the body was unable to provide the evidence they needed. Nevertheless, they decided to exaggerate the outcome to the public, claiming to have found new evidence that had led them closer to solving the case. This news spread far and wide, catching the attention of a woman named Linda, who contacted David after seeing the exhumation on TV. Linda shared her recollections with the investigators, providing them with potentially valuable information. Linda informed David Brewer that Loretta had inscribed the killer's name using her blood. David, taken aback, inquired about how she obtained this information, given that the police had restricted access to the crime scene. Linda clarified that she resided at Heidi's grandmother's residence during high school, which coincided with the time of the murder. Following the incident, Heidi's grandfather requested Linda and one of Heidi's aunts to visit Loretta's house to pack Heidi's belongings. Linda mentioned that this allowed them entry, and upon arrival, she witnessed a capital T and an O with her own eyes. This discovery was a significant breakthrough, but they required a photo of the crime scene to substantiate it. David met with Heidi, shared the new details, and expressed his frustration over the absence of crime scene photos. Heidi suddenly recalled a photo possibly stored in a box of belongings her grandmother had preserved over the years. They proceeded to search the grandmother's house for the box, and subsequently looked for the photo inside. The box contained everything related to the case, including her grandmother's journal documenting Heidi's statements. However, the most unsettling find was a photo of Heidi beside her mother's body outline, which proved to be crucial. The image depicted Heidi and her mother's blood with the letters T and O. David Brewer began connecting the dots. Upon reading the journal, he learned about Tom's mistreatment of Heidi's mother and Heidi's accusations against him. The key revelation was Loretta's attempt to identify her killer by writing with her blood, managing only to inscribe an O before succumbing. However, even with the photograph, the detectives required additional evidence to apprehend Thomas Egley, who was now suspected to be Tom in this particular case. The investigation came to a standstill once again until an individual decided to provide invaluable assistance to the investigators. Lisa Carter, a woman who resided near Thomas, contacted the police department to inform them that she was his neighbor. She revealed that Thomas had approached her after she had watched the exhumation video, requesting her to look after his dogs as he anticipated the police might come for him soon. Lisa Carter also believed that Thomas was the perpetrator behind Loretta's murder, and thus she offered her help in the case. She requested permission from the police to wear a recording device in order to obtain Thomas's confession. The police agreed, and arrangements were made accordingly. Lisa approached Thomas and fabricated a story, informing him that her husband had been training to become a detective in Utah. She informed Thomas that he had become a topic of discussion as he was already known as Loretta Jones's murderer. All of these statements affected Thomas Egley, but he did not confess as he still harbored doubts about Lisa's trustworthiness. However, after 2 days of attempting to gain Thomas's trust, on July 26, 2016, he began to open up to Lisa about the events that occurred on the night of July 30th, 1970. Thomas admitted that he had knocked on Loretta's door, and she had allowed him to enter. He claimed that he had intended to engage in an intimate encounter with her, but Loretta rejected his advances, causing him to feel worthless. According to Thomas, Loretta left him in the living room to retrieve something from the kitchen, and upon her return, he grabbed a small knife and stabbed her. After stabbing Loretta, Thomas proceeded to engage in a consensual, intimate act with her, despite Lisa's confusion regarding the consent, given Loretta's initial refusal. When questioned about what happened next, Thomas revealed that he completely lost control and proceeded to slit Loretta's throat. Lisa reported that Thomas expressed no remorse for his actions, indicating that he only cared about his own safety. Thomas's arrest was based on a crucial confession provided by him, which served as the key evidence for the investigators. Loretta's sister, Carolyn Kendall, had limited knowledge about Thomas Egley. She only knew that Loretta had gone on a blind date with him once, but Loretta had expressed her dislike for Thomas and wanted no further involvement with him. This explains why Loretta rejected Thomas's advances on that fateful night. Thomas Egley, a 76-year-old local drifter, had a history of an unstable home life, multiple relationships with women, and 3 previous marriages. Despite having 5 children, he mostly lived a solitary life. In August 2016, Thomas was charged with first-degree felony murder and forced intimacy in the 7th District Court. Under Utah law at the time, Thomas's official charge was second-degree criminal homicide murder. On August 18, 2016, Thomas was arrested without any complications in Rocky Ford, Colorado, based on a $1 million warrant. Eventually, Thomas pleaded guilty to the murder, resulting in the dismissal of his assault case. On November 22, 2016, he received a sentence of 10 years to life. Throughout the proceedings, Thomas showed little remorse, except for a written statement read by his attorney, David Allred, which seemed insincere. Thomas even expressed his belief that he should be released, as he hadn't committed any crimes since Loretta's murder. In court, he questioned why the family of the deceased chose to reopen a case from 46 years ago, indicating a lack of remorse. According to Thomas, he was unaware that Heidi, Loretta's daughter, was present in the room when he killed her mother. Loretta was aware of this, which explains her lack of resistance or screams during the attack. It is likely that Thomas would not have spared Heidi if he had known she was there. Upon receiving his sentence, he voiced his dissatisfaction to the judge regarding his confinement in the state prison located in Salt Lake County, as it prohibited any visitors. In response, the judge advised him to pursue an appeal. Heidi, who had endured immense pain for over 4 decades, finally had the chance to confront her mother's killer. She conveyed the profound trauma caused by her mother's death and expressed her desire for Thomas Egley to remain imprisoned, separated from his loved ones forever. She vowed to ensure that he would never be granted freedom, even if he became eligible for parole in 10 years. While some may view it as closure, Heidi regarded it as justice. She believed that no words could truly provide the closure and relief she sought, but the fact that justice had been served held immeasurable significance to her.